you want to have diversity in the stock. So you don't want them to be related or have an ancestry the same. So they're very careful, but it's all about science. It's not how they get along. So, and so it's very careful. Not always. The first encounter. No. It's really Jerry. How are you?
She's your teammate.
Yes.
When do you guys get back to the party?
It's a question this year, usually November 1st, but Richard's sister has a really bad cancer, and he's her health advocate. So she's really between, what do you call it, between denial and being a goose. She's really been interested. She wants to get into this, that, and so we're trying to steer her so she gets the best chance because she's not going to be. She just started last week. It's in small intestine, which is very rare, but by the time they found it, it's not going to get well, trying to buy some time.
Where's your phone?
It had some damage. People at the beach, have trouble. 6 months later.
Well, this is one.
I can't afford the insurance. I can't afford the insurance.
What is insurance?
Oh, it's really.
How long ago did you have So we are going to begin in 2 minutes, just so that you know, so you can wind up your conversations or take your last mouthful. 1. So while Pastor James tries to order an Uber for somebody that needs to get back from college and get some water, I want to welcome everybody once again to our series, Meeting House Theology. I'm Rabbi Linda Joseph, and I'll be talking with Pastor James today. This Lunch and Learn was a little bit of an experiment by the clergy of this meeting house. We based it on the Lunch and Learn series that Beta Viv runs, my congregation runs. We included it as part of that series. And we have been thrilled by the response. And I know that many of you have asked what comes next. We will talk about what comes next in our clergy meeting. We are just so thankful to each one of you for coming out and for taking part in these deeper conversations of what the theologies of our faiths are and hearing us dialogue. We get to do this in meetings together, study meetings together, but it's great to be able to do it with you as well, right?
Yes.
Just agree. So our topic today is mysticism in our traditions. And it's a topic that's close to my heart, but I'm going to let my esteemed colleague go first.
Wow, she's allowing me to go first. Unbelievable. Well, first and foremost, I just want to say thank you all for coming out once again on this beautiful October day. It was cold and rainy the earlier part of this week. And now the sun is bright and shining, and it's a whole lot warmer outside than what it was the last several days. So we thank God for all of you who have been with us for the last 5 weeks. We have some great conversations over the last 5 weeks. And those conversations are online, so if you missed any of them, you can go online and to the Oakland Mills Interfaith Center website, and then you can tap on the Beta Viv link, and then you will see the services on Thursdays at noon. So you can just tap on any of the links on a Thursday, and you can watch them.
Can I just add to that? They are all under a category, Meeting House Theology, on the Beta Viv YouTube website, and after this session, I will be sending that out to all of the clergy that are part of the meeting house and ask them to share that link to the series with you so you can watch them all on YouTube or none of them on YouTube or just the ones, just your favorite ministers on YouTube, whatever you want.
Yeah, so it's really, really great. If you missed any of them, you can watch it. So the topic of mysticism in our traditions, what is a Christian mystic? What is that? You know, it's not everyday common language. That's number one that you would think of, your belief, your journey as a Christian as being a mystic. There's a more hard definition of Christian mystics, but then it's a more liberal, loose definition of a Christian mystic, and I want to talk about both. So I'll start with the hard version of being a Christian mystic. One of them, a hard version of a Christian mystic belief tradition, would be looking at the conception narrative of Jesus. That would be a hard one. How did Mary become pregnant? What happened there? Was this some powerful act of the Spirit of God, right? So that's one of them. Another one would be a hard Christian mystic belief would be the Eucharist, communion. Does those little drops of blood go up into the air, as we take communion? What happens with communion when we say that this is the body and the blood of Jesus Christ? What happens? Are we taking the blood and the body of Jesus Christ? What happens? Is that what is that about? And then another would be the resurrection of Jesus Christ. What happened to Jesus' body, the real body of Jesus Christ? If he was fully divine and fully human, shouldn't there be some bones somewhere? What happened to his bones? But then the more liberal concept of Christian mysticism is just to live by the Spirit, that every day your life, you're walking throughout life, you're living by the Spirit, you're living in the Spirit. We're in a sermon series in our church, we're teaching about faith now. And basically in our teaching about faith, one of the key principles about faith that we're teaching is that faith is really obedience to your own journey. It's not the ability to see anything, or you're not even expecting what the end results are. You're just focused on your obedience, doing your part within your journey. And in a real sense, that is essentially to be a mystic, to think about your life of, I'm not necessarily concerned about all of the things that I can see, but I'm just focusing on the Spirit of God using me one day at a time. And there's a writer, I don't want to jack his name up, but his name is Karl Rahner. One of his quotes, he says, one of the most renowned Christian theologians of the 20th century, and he says that the Christians of the future will be a mystic, or they will not exist at all. That's what he says, that they will either be a mystic or they won't exist at all. And basically what he's saying that is that ultimately the future of Christians is literally based on life in the Spirit, and not the hard mystic approach, but more so the liberal approach, that the Christians of the future will be more spiritual than anything else. They will literally just try to live out their faith as spirit beings instead of trying to understand the more hard conceptions of a mystic reality.
Wow, thank you. So Judaism is a very practical, everyday religion. And we have the concept that the Torah, which was God-given or God-inspired, depending on how you frame it, brings us mitzvot, brings us commandments of things that we do, and we have a festival calendar that we keep. So very practical and down to earth. Amongst Jews, not a majority of Jews, but amongst the Jews, there are people who delve into mysticism, and we have a whole mystic tradition. That mystic tradition is called Kabbalah, which means to receive. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Academics understand that the Kabbalah dates from the 13th century with the publication of a book called the Zohar, which means the shining or the light. It's a mystical commentary on the Torah, and it was published by a rabbi called Moses de Leon in Spain. That's how academics understand it. Jewish mystics understand it in a totally different way. They believe that mysticism roots itself back to the time of Abraham, our father. As I said, the Hebrew word for a mystic is a Kabbalist. Kabbalah means to receive. And my teacher in mysticism, Hasidic mysticism, thinks about it this way. We have the potential, each one of us, to be receivers, like an antenna. And if you point your antenna in the right direction and you reduce the static in the world and you amplify the signal, the world and how you perceive it can change. You get a different take on what is there in the present. The early rabbinic sources understand that Jewish mysticism is divided into two different categories. The first category I'll talk about is called Ma'aseh Bereshit, literally works of creation. And this is the endeavor to try to understand how space and time emanate from the Creator, who is beyond space and time. And they develop two frameworks for that. The first is the concept that there is 4 worlds of existence. There is emanation, the spiritual world. So if you imagine God as a point, Ein Sof, one without end, there's emanation, the spiritual coming out of that. Then there is the world of creation, the intellectual idea of something. Then there is a world of formation, how we conceive that in the emotional. And then there's the world of action, the physical. So if you think about the creation of a house, you desire a house, right? You want somewhere to live. That's the spiritual. Then you need a house. Because you need a house, you create a blueprint. That's the intellectual. And then you start building the house, and that's where the aggravation comes in, right? That is the emotional. And then the house is built. That's the physical. And everything in this world can be understood through that framework of 4. Also out of Ma'aseh Bereshit, out of the work of creation, there is the concept of the 10 Sephirot, the 10 circles of energy through which God emanates into this world. And between each of these energies, there are lines of energy itself, one feeding into each other, and each forming from side to side a point of balance. These manifestations, if you like, of God are imposed upon the four-world structure I just explained before. And that's the world of creation. And if you as a mystic master that, then you have insight into the creative process. The other second major area in Jewish mysticism, according to the rabbis, is what they call Ma'aseh Merkava, the work of the chariot. Some of you might be familiar with the passage from Ezekiel, where Ezekiel sees a divine chariot and describes it in great detail. This is the mystic's attempt to experience God, the work of the chariot. The figure out God's inner world, if you can even do that, to get close through a visionary experience to the one that is beyond understanding. And one can do that by diving deep into that description of the chariot. And there are 4 stages to doing that. There is descent, encounter, reconciliation, and transformation. And they all correspond to the 4 worlds that I just spoke about before. A mystic that engages in this discipline gains insight into oneself, because we're all made in the image of God, as well as God too. To do this, you have to have some dissolution of your ego, have an idea in which direction you are going, because there's always a risk as you descend of disorientation or death. I have a story about that if you want to ask later. So it's the work of Maaseh Merkava is something that's not done lightly. It's reserved for those who have significant understanding of the practical in the world, of the balance and connection that is in this world, who understand the rational world and have their feet firmly on the ground, which is why it's recommended that someone that does this be at least the age of 40 years old, male. I can get rid of that piece, right? Male, 40, and be fully versed in Torah. It also helps, as my teacher Mitch Cheffetz says, to have a sense of humor while you do this. So that's a little bit about the basis of Jewish mysticism in 10 minutes. We would love to open it up to your questions. There's a microphone.
My thinking about mysticism is that religion is all mysticism. It's all based on belief, and the belief has to be mystical because it's not factual. I mean, who would believe that the Red Sea would open for the Jews, or that Moses would come down from the mountain with 10 commandments? I mean, you believe it or you don't, and you take that with you. You're, I guess, a light Jew.
Well, I can agree with you that all religion, faith, indeed, is a mystery, and that's why I believe that it's a journey worth taking. But I also say that belief for Christians is that we talked about this the last time we were here. That belief for the Christian is essential. We don't debate that. Belief is who we are. We when you become a Christian, you have to believe. So I would say that that indeed there are certain things in the biblical narrative that are factual and some are not actual events. But I do think that those are things that require further teaching and knowledge. But I also think that those elements, all of the Bible for me is essential for teaching and telling stories and to improve our faith, and to increase it in a real sense. I believe that every single story in the Bible. From cover to cover, the Bible was written into the hands of at least 6 different types of oppression. And the stories that are told in the passage in the Bible really are given to a people to increase their faith so that they can make it through the oppression. And without those stories, given it's true or false, fact or fiction, fact or hyperbole, I said that wrong, hyperbole, those stories are essential to getting a group of people over. So that's why I think it's very important to be on the journey of faith.
So I 99% agree with you. Of course, we struggle, right? Yes. Which is a difference between Christianity and with Judaism. We struggle with the idea of God and Torah, and we struggle with it all. Christians have to make that teleological leap that Soren Kierkegaard talks about into belief, right? You have to, at some stage, give way to rationality and just jump in with full faith into mysticism. And Jews struggle with that teleological leap, and some of them make it. Some cross the divide, and some are like, shall I jump? Should I cautiously walk across, right? But in terms of the stories having a mystic element to them, the miracles that are there, I totally agree. Even some of the early commentators, medieval commentators, Ibn Ezra comes to mind immediately, ask whether the stories are true or not. And Ahad Ha'am, an early Zionist, a religious Zionist, writes the fact that it doesn't matter if they're true or not, right? And as my teacher, Mitch Cheffetz, who I'll probably refer to a lot because I've been studying Kabbalah with him for the last 20 years, so, naturally I see it a lot through his eyes as well. He talks about the fact that we live life as if. Our faith is as if. We live our world as if God exists. We read Torah as if it is true. It might be true, but I can't tell you for certainty that it is true. But we approach it as if, and that's the spiritual trust that we put in. And some of us will make that teleological leap. Many of our Orthodox Jewish friends have done that it is true. And some of us are still in that struggling place. Does that answer your question, Jim? Other questions? Come take the microphone. Whoever. Fight it out amongst yourselves.
Everybody will get a chance to go. This is the last one. I think we have time. High holidays are over.
First, thank you to both of you and to all your colleagues. This has been a great series of talks. Each other religions have, besides Judaism and Christianity, have mystic traditions. Islam has the Sufis. The thing you were talking about with the 10 emanations looks a lot like the chakras that you learn about in yoga class. To what extent is there dialogue among the various mystics, or how do they relate to each other?
So, in fact, there is a dialogue amongst mystics. There are a number of get-togethers with mystics from all different faiths and traditions where they talk. And one of the things that I think mystics understand is that we're all yearning, searching for the same sort of divine mysteries. There is a lot of crossover. What is fantastic is that there's a lot of crossover in these mystical structures that we imagine and build, the 10 Sefirot, the mandala, the, the concept that there are different realities. These exist in many mystic understandings. It's almost as if it's in our human DNA to imagine the world like that. I know of a number of different get-togethers. I know that there's one happening this December, which I'm not going to, that of people that are getting together to talk about the different mystic traditions and ideas. I do also believe that there is cross-pollination as these were developing. There's certainly within Kabbalah aspects of Sufism, or within Sufism aspects of Kabbalah. And we have to also remember that Jews were the tradespeople of ancient times. One of the reasons that Jews were the tradespeople of ancient times is that they all spoke a common language with each other. And so they were ideal to go from country to country. I'm also a folklorist, and that's actually how folk tales spread around Europe, and also between India and Europe. They were bought by Jews. We were the conduits of a lot of that. Because, a good story works wherever you take it. But the same with mystical ideas, right? So yes, there is cross-pollination. And ultimately, I think what we learn from that cross-pollination is that whatever our faith traditions, we have a common source of spirituality that is innate in our human nature, if we open ourselves up to it. And that's it, if we open ourselves up to it.
I agree. I agree. That's all I have to say. She had a question.
First of all, I'd like to tell you I've been to some of the rabbis' talks on Kabbalism, on this stuff, and even though I know some of the vocabulary, I still don't get it, so it's okay, it's a process. But we both have in common the love for stories about golems. Is that part of mysticism?
About
Golems.
Yeah.
Because we both talked about that. We both love to read books about that.
About golems. So what is a golem?
I love them. They're so fun.
The Maharal of Prague, who was a rabbi that lived in Prague, Rabbi Judah Loew, is said to have understood enough of the mysteries of the world, specifically the works of creation, that when the Jewish community was under threat, the Maharal was able to create a creature from mud. And with some incantations and writing the letters Aleph, Mem, Taf, which is the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the middle letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and the last letter of the Hebrew alphabet, spells out the word Emet, which means truth. With those incantations and that writing, was able to bring this creature alive to defend the Jewish community from being attacked. And then when the golem had served the golem's purpose, Rabbi Yehuda Loew had the golem lie down and took off the first letter of that Aleph, Mem, Taf. And if you remove the Aleph from the word that means truth, Emet, you get the word Met, which means death, and was able to put the golem to rest. So within the legends of Judaism, once again, this is a story I can't guarantee you is true or not. Within the legends of Judaism, the golem at different times has been created by different individuals to come, usually to rescue the Jewish people or to take care of the Jewish people. It has its roots in the mysteries of Kabbalah. That's certainly part of the story. It is not essential to the works of Kabbalah, though it uses of the received tradition, though it certainly uses the structure of the received tradition in those stories. Hasidic stories also use the structure of Kabbalah, of Jewish mysticism, Hasidism, which is a later movement in Judaism, the idea that one finds joy in faith, is really a popular, bringing down to earth, if you like, version of Kabbalah. It's not the intellectual of Kabbalah, but it's the popularization of many of those ideas. And in fact, that's where most Jews know the conceptions of Kabbalah from.
Right.
The intellectual pursuit of Kabbalah is, for serious mystics, is quite heavy and complicated, which is why you're confused, and in depth, and it takes, I still don't understand it totally, and I've been studying it for over 20 years. Yeah.
Well, my next part is I'd like to suggest that we do a session on some of the stories using this, because it's an easier way to access it, because it's having a use. I'm a more practical kind of person, so it's more earthy, but I just really enjoy hearing about those.
Hasidic stories, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know much about that, but I will say this: as it relates to living a practical life, I'm a firm believer in practical theology, and I know that we have a diverse audience here, and I'll just say this regarding fact and truth in your own journey of faith. I don't necessarily believe that that the stories of fact and truth necessarily matter, because we do know that there's one thing that's true, it's certain, is your own journey. And if the stories of our faith traditions help us on our own journey in life, if it help us to become better in any way, to see something that we didn't see in any way, I think that that's more important than challenging a mystery that you won't know the answers in this life. Whether it's fact or truth, you just be in a fight forever trying to figure that piece out. But what we do know is true is your own journey, and I think your own journey matters. And if the book can help you with your own journey, then I think that that is something that's very true in my own experience.
So I think I'm tagging on to both of you, but very interesting, the story that you told, Rabbi, because there is a very famous story that is among the American Indian population. I only know about it because it's a big thing in Scholastic, and Scholastic has introduced this. It's called the Mud Pony, and there are definite threads there, so I thought that was interesting. It's a great little short story for children. I guess I want to ask you, Rabbi, I'm not putting you on the spot, but you can do things like this. I'm not worried about you. But you studying Kabbalah for so many years, if you could just, and it really is very cryptic in many ways, but I'm wondering if you could kind of recount some things in which it's made a difference in your life.
So I largely study Kabbalah by reading Hasidic texts. And I'm very blessed with the teacher that I've had. How it has made a difference in my life. I think that after a while, you get imbued with some of the basic ideas, and they become the lens through which you see the world. The one that springs to mind immediately is the concept that each of us has a light within us, a divine light, even the most evil person you can think of. So imagine the most evil human being you can think of, you know, Hitler, Some people today might say Putin, right? Somebody who you picture as evil. Even that person has a divine spark within them. It might be buried deep, deep, deep. It might be so hard to see. But our job in the world as human beings is, when we are confronted with them, is to try to focus on that divine light. And in doing so, in seeing that in them, and sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes it's really hard. In seeing that in them, we can perhaps, just perhaps, let that light grow a little more, and then a little more, and then a little more. So I know you don't believe this, but sometimes in congregations I come up against really difficult people. You've never had that. You've never had that. You've never, right?
No comment.
No comment by any of the clergy here. And I always say to myself, when someone is being difficult, God forbid, focus on their divine light. Focus on their divine light. Approach them through their divine light. Sometimes it's really hard. I don't always achieve that, but it's always there in the back of my mind, trying to find that divine light. So I think that's one way it's influenced me as a person. I think another way it has influenced me as a person is that I sometimes, when analyzing a situation, will take the structures of the Kabbalists and I will analyze a situation that way. So something happens in the world and I'll take myself, there's many ways I could do it. I could do it psychologically, right? I could do it systematically, but I'll sometimes also take the Kabbalist frameworks, the four worlds, and say, how is this existing in the four worlds? What is the motivation? What is the inspiration of this person? What is, I might be living in the world with the aggravation with them, right? But what is it that they practically want at the end? What is it that they're trying to do? So I think it's influenced me in many different ways, but those are two ways that it has definitely influenced me. It fascinates me, let me say this, that the mystical structure seems to be built into Christianity just in its being. And our mystical structure isn't like an option, right, in Judaism. You can live your life, a Torah true life, and there are people that do, and never broach the mystical at all, and still be a good Jew. The mysticism is something that is there, but it's sort of an extra layer. It's a deeper layer of our understanding. And certainly it's influenced some of the things that we practically do, right? We sing a song that welcomes the angels to the Sabbath table. Sometimes we sing it in synagogue for Jews that are here. It's a song, Shalom Aleichem, right? That's a mystical endeavor, as is welcoming the Sabbath bride into our services. So that we see influences of the mysticism on what we do practically. But you can be totally unaware of that. But I'm fascinated by this idea that it's innate in just what you do. And I wonder how much of that is related to that leap of faith that is so essential.
Yes, you're right. As you were speaking and you're talking about even the darkest person in the world, evil, has a spark of light within them. As it relates to Christendom, we would call it a conversion experience, where you see the light. You have to see the light first in order to be converted. It just doesn't happen unless you see the light. That's a mystical tradition. You see the light and then you become better day by day by day by day. For instance, Let's take Paul. Jews would know him as Saul, right? So Saul, and the Bible talks about it in Acts 9, where Saul fell off his horse and saw the light. He was blinded for 3 days, and then, Jesus spoke to him and said, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And then he becomes the biggest influence in the Christian world, second to Jesus in terms of Christian writings. You can take that. But then I'm also reminded of by a famous writer, by Emmanuel Lartey, and he's a pastoral care author. And he says that the person is more important than the problem, and the relationship is more important than the solution. I love that quote because if you're talking about a person that has really evil within them, that they've done some evil things, they have some problems, they have some darkness within them, but the light that you want to show to them is their humanity, that you are more important than your issues. And if you show them your humanity, then they would see that they are more important than their issues, and they can offer some positive light to the world. That's why he says the relationship is more important than the solution, because the relationship in itself is showing this dark person, this evil person, this person that has all this stuff going on, their humanity, and that they're worth something other than whatever they are doing. So I definitely agree with that, but I think that the mystical side of it for Christians itself is that in order for you to come into better, to live a better life, to treat people better, to see the world in a different way, you first have to have a conversion experience. And that's why baptism is another one of our mystical traditions, that when we are baptized, we lay down our old life and we come up anew in Jesus Christ. So all of these different things, there's a lot of mystical traditions that's interwoven within the Christian practice, but we don't see it that way because that's not a part of our common language in our modern day.
So I'm struck with the idea of light without and light within, right? And the interesting difference between light without and light within. But I think it's the same idea, right? Because what we're trying to do is see the good in the person. I just want to talk about baptism. We also have an immersive experience that's different to baptism. We have a ritual bath called a mikveh, and it's used a number of different ways. It's done really to mark ends and beginnings. Traditionally, it's used by women at the end of menstruation to mark the time when they are most fertile and able to have sex with their husband, and then when they have their next period, they stop doing that. That's from a traditional standpoint, but it's also used prior to the holidays for people to go to the mikveh to mark the end of one series, before the high holidays, to mark the end of the year and starting a new beginning. It's used by people in all sorts of formats. I've used it with bar and bat mitzvah, that they go and mark the end of their time of growing up and the beginning of their time of being a Jewish adult, marking really an end and a beginning. And baptism sort of does that as well, right? You immerse one way and you come out a Christian, which is an end and a beginning as well. But I don't know whether it changes you like it does with baptism. Really, it marks the end and it begins. It can change. The only time it really, I think, is used, it's done before weddings as well, before someone gets married, but also it's used for conversion. And that would be the most similar to baptism, that when one converts, the moment of conversion is after one has been to see a board of 3 rabbis, who say that you are ready to convert, then you would go to the mikveh and then you immerse from the mikveh, from the ritual bath, as Jewish. And I suppose that moment would be the most analogous.
in the Torah, there are lots of instances of messengers. And Isaac wrestled with, Jacob wrestled with, in quotes, God, somebody. Are these examples of mysticism or what?
No. Yes, they are. As I said, the mystical tradition believes that mysticism goes back to the time of Abraham, and these are the stories that they will dwell back into. And in fact, in Jewish mysticism, in Kabbalah, there is quite while there is an angelology that is in the Bible, it's mentioned in the Midrash, in the stories on the Bible as well. It's really much more fully developed and systematized within Kabbalah, and enunciated. So yes, the Kabbalists would read back a long tradition of messengers or angels, if you would like, and different types of angels back into the Kabbalistic tradition.
It seems to me that within Christianity, there's more of a, well, I don't know if room for, but I've heard more about Christian mystics who go into the mountains, who go into a cave and meditate and have a spiritual experience. We don't seem to, in Judaism, have a whole lot, or I think of Reb Nachman, who talks about being out in nature, but there seems to be less emphasis, and perhaps there's a more positive image of the one who studies, the one who is in the synagogue praying. Do we in Judaism have examples of that? Or I know that certainly we hear more about Christian mystics.
Do you want to talk about Christian mystics and asceticism?
Yes. So silence is holy. Meditation is holy in the Christian world. That spending time with God, that prayer is not just I'm praying and I'm doing all the talking. But prayer for the Christian is also silent meditation, that there are times I may fall on my knees and I may not say a word. I'm just listening for the voice of the Spirit to speak to me. So in the Christian world, that's a part of practice. Silence, meditation, going on retreats. I'm not too sure if we go to caves anymore, you know. So, but going to a retreat center and getting away from the world and just being in that environment. And then also, study is sacred in the Christian world as well. I think that Christians and Jews would have that same thing, that studying the word, studying different writers, different books, that's sacred as well. That's a form of worship. So silence, study, prayer, listening, all of those things are sacred in a form of worship in Christendom.
So at the turn of not last millennia, because we just went through that, but the millennia before, at the time actually when Jesus walked the earth, that there were sects in Judaism that practiced such asceticism. They no longer exist, and you know, it's an extremely interesting historical period that I'm not really going to go into, but I want to say that there was a tradition that ceased to exist. I'm thinking, I was trying to think of famous Jewish ascetics. And the closest I can come to is Shimon ben Shethach, who gets locked up in a cave with his son for 40, I think it's 40 years, it might be 60 or 80 years, don't quote me on the number of years. They study the Kabbalah, they study Jewish mysticism, they come out, they don't like the world that they see, and they go back into their cave. But he's not alone, he's with his son studying, right? We tend to do things in groups in Judaism. You don't study Jewish mysticism on your own, you find yourself a teacher more knowledgeable than yourself. We regard specifically the mystic tradition as something that can unground you from reality. And we're a tradition really based in reality. The famous story is of 4 rabbis who want to get close to God and who are studying Jewish mysticism. And it's said that through their meditation techniques, they managed to get to the Pardes, that means an orange orchard. But it also stands, remember where there's this structure of the 4 worlds in Jewish mysticism, for the 4 ways that we interpret Torah, and all of these things, anything with the 4 is always related. One is a simple understanding of Torah. Rashi is very famous for that. This is what it means. One is remez, which is the hints that are in the Torah, like what is hinted at by the text. One is drash, which means the storytelling. These are the stories that the rabbis understand that were also like the hints and the stories. This is part of the oral law. And then the final is sod, the secrets. And together they are an acronym for Pardes. So they go to the Pardes. They go to this world on high, into this holy Pardes, and they see some water. And they look at the water, and in fact the text says water, doubled. And there were 4 results of these rabbis going on this mystical journey. One came out alive, Rabbi Akiva. One went stark raving mad. One died. And one person came out an agnostic. That's Acher, yeah. That's the name, Shimon ben Shethach, right? And that story teaches us the dangers of going into Maaseh Bereshit, the works of creation, and Maaseh Merkavah, the works of formation, that one really needs to be grounded in doing so. This is not something, some of you may have heard of a group called the Kabbalah Center, and they deal with the superstition of Kabbalah. That's not real Kabbalah. The real Kabbalah is a very intellectual and mystical pursuit, and you can lose sight of reality. Like when you meditate, you always want... Do people here meditate? Anyone meditate? You always want something that wakes you up, right? Somebody that rings a bell at the end, or a thump, or a word that's going to bring you out of the meditation. Or if you're meditating on your own, you want to drink lots of water before that because, hopefully you're not so deep that you don't realize you need to go to the bathroom, right? There's always the danger of losing yourself if you're doing it correctly.
One, two.
I get nervous in front of a mic.
But people can hear you on the streaming if you're in front of the mic.
I appreciate this discussion. And I've always had a problem with the irrational compared to the rational. My training has been in a rational field. And I've found that there are elements in the rational which can only be explained by what could be considered irrational. And what you said, Pastor, about using the irrational to facilitate your approaches to reality. And what you said yesterday about the dash between the born and the death date. The dash represents an entire life. For those who are trained rationally, the square root of -1, which can't exist physically, can be a field of great exploration. It's compound variables. And I could be corrected, but
You're not going to get correction from me. I'm math challenged. So.
But a lot of things fall into place because you can imagine the square root of -1. You can't prove it physically. But if you use that as a tool, other things fall into place more easily. And as we've done more and more research in physics, not we, people have done more and more research in physics, they found that things are occurring that can't be explained by what's been done before. So those who attack mysticism or believe it doesn't have any use are wrong, in my humble opinion, because it can be used to put light on reality.
Thank you for that.
Oh, that was great.
I just want to add to that. I think there's a real conceit when we think that we can understand everything with our rational mind. I think that that's like so much ego that we think that we human beings can understand absolutely everything rationally. Certainly there's a certain amount we can, but that gives us all the power. And I had this discussion with my husband, actually, because he thinks that everything needs to be rational. And I said, I come from such a different place because I don't have so much ego to say that I, as a human person, or as humankind, can understand everything in the rational world. And everything I can't understand, until I'm given some format to understand it, is a mystery. And I don't believe those mysteries are ever going to be solved in human lifetimes, now and in the future. I think there's always going to be mystery in that which is beyond our ken. And isn't that amazing? Doesn't that put us in our place in the world?
Yes, that's the beauty of life. The great mystery. No one knows none of us know what we will become, right? We don't know. We can be on a track to thinking that we're going to become this or that, but we don't know. And that, for me, that's what makes life worth living, the journey. I mean, I preached about the journey on Sunday. I'm excited about the journey. I'm not worried about the stuff that I don't understand or the stuff that's out there that I cannot see yet. That if I get down the road a little bit, I'll eventually see it if it's for me to see. But the journey is so much on the journey that's worth living, so much on the journey that is that gives us so much meaning and so much purpose that if we focus so much on the stuff that we don't understand and the stuff that we can't see, we can miss everything that we were purposed for. That's just right there on our journey. And for me, I can't afford to live my life not living in purpose. So I want to live my life in purpose. And in order for me to do that, I have to be very aware of just what's right in front of me, just the journey that I'm on. And ultimately, that's the best life to live, in my view. You had a question.
I think I heard you say something like baptism is a mystical experience. And immersion can change you. I read a book in the past year that talks about John the Baptizer, who supposedly baptized Jesus, but a scholar who is an expert on the Greek language says that the word that is translated as baptizer should be translated as John the Bather. And the specific point of that is that John the Bather had set up a bathing process of people getting together and going in the water and sitting around and talking to each other. Now, what was that? What it is supposedly is that John the Bather was challenging the Roman Empire's use of bathing, where Roman people would sit around in these Roman baths and talk at length with each other. And that was part of the whole substance of the Roman Empire. And John the Bather was saying, not so fast. There's an alternative. There's an alternative to that.
That's interesting.
I never heard of that story before. But it's a really, really wonderful take on John. But I do know that John's head was cut off and it was served on a lunch meat tray because somebody wanted to do a dance that they shouldn't have done and all of that. But yeah, I think that when we get into the historical Roman society and looking at the persecution that the Romans delivered to folks who were believers of the way, or folks who had a different approach to faith than what their norm was, then maybe you could be right. Maybe John was a person who challenged that, because we know that he was a person who didn't mind challenging people openly, and he didn't care about how much power you had. He would challenge you openly. And that, of course, turned out to be his demise by challenging the powerful forces openly. But I don't know too much about that. I don't have any other comment.
So our time is drawing to a close. I do want to share with you some books on Jewish mysticism if you're interested. The classic in English, which is actually translated from the Hebrew, is The 13 Petaled Rose by Adin Steinsaltz. It is a wonderful book. More readable and understandable is probably Lawrence Kushner's Honey from the Rock. And then if you're into stories that teach you things, anything written by my friend Mitchell Cheffetz, this is the second in his book. His first book is known as The Seventh Telling. His second book, The 33rd Hour. The third book, Blood Covenant, are novels that teach about Jewish mysticism. This is my teacher, and believes in the teaching of difficult concepts by stories. And then something fun for those of you that love cats. Rachel Adler's Tales of the Holy Mystic Cat, who teaches us everything about mysticism. Her cat does. And it's written, reverently collected by his humble assistant, Rachel Adler.
Well, I would tell you to read the prophets if you want to find out about a little bit of mystic stuff. Particularly read 1 Kings chapter number 19. You could read really 15 through 20. You probably should look at, but read, check out 1 Kings chapter 19. I'll just read a little passage for you in closing, which I think that this is kind of like one of the questions that was asked earlier today. I'll pick up at verse number 11, and it says, "The Lord said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." What does that mean? The Lord's about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" That's some mystical stuff, if you ask me.
Yeah.
So you can check it out.
Yeah. Thank you all for coming. This is the end of the series. You can find us on YouTube. I will have your clergy send out the link to the collection of this series, and you have been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll do this again sometime soon. Send the rabbi some of your ideas for conversations, and maybe next time you all can be the panelists. All right. Yeah.
So can I just take a picture of the books as opposed to writing?
Here's that. Well, Bill, how you doing, Bill? That's a good question.
That we can relate to. Really bad. We didn't know it was bad. But now, you know, you grow up, you get a little education, you get a good job, you get a nice neighborhood, you know, oh yeah, wow, you know, it's different. So one day my grandma, we were in church with her all the time. But one time we went to church, so they would be falling out from my mouth. All this carrying us. Right? And we would laugh as kids. It's funny thing. You know. It's us. About 11 of us. Oh, no. Come on, Grandma. You did not. She's in her shower. You know, all of us is emotional. You know, all this time. We just like, oh, it's not funny anymore. So I asked her a question.
Yes and no. They're trying to do program. And,
You know, and as I got older, I was getting back to her story. Stuff she was just literally by herself. Because my grandfather, he was in the war.
Like that, I'd like to hear us come around Spain.
My aunt was discharged. His kidneys was messed up. It was so bad that when he came home, he lived for maybe 3 weeks. He wore down. So she had 9 children by this man. She had to raise all 9 of them by herself. She had to work inside of a freezer for over 40 years, working inside all of the companies. She made $9 an hour. You know, at the height of her career,
well, yeah, right, it is.
she made $12.50 per hour.
I mean,
With 9 children.
Yes.
22 people living in the house.
They did do a good job. They did do a good job. Just a lot of it.
When I was thinking about it, wasn't, and, you know, as good as some of us, nobody got some good shit. You know, not want to give up. All kinds of stuff.
yes.
You would come up to a beautiful museum, all the time around.
And then, you know, you got children on drugs, tripping on crack cocaine. You gotta raise their children. So not only should you raise our children, you should raise somebody else. So my grandma,
I mean, she was a nice lady.